tonight, this is actually kind of an interesting night because as much as I would love to take credit for the fact that that the Mass fit perfectly with what we're talking about tonight, it was actually an accident. And by accident, I mean God was just do this night at this time. And so we did. But it wasn't planned by us. But tonight we're talking about, the name of our night is Split. And what we're talking about is divorce and what the church actually teaches about divorce. So, like I said, it's a little bit more of a serious night, but it is kind of interesting that the Mass was all about marriage and divorce, and we got to bless all of the married couples in the church. And so here we are today talking about divorce. Do you guys know what the Catholic Church's teaching on divorce is? The official teaching? That divorce sucks. That's the official teaching. I'm telling you, it's in catechism somewhere. And that it brings a lot of pain, and that it is not from God. And you know what? I can tell you guys, as a child of divorce sucks. And it causes a lot of pain, and it is not from God. And there's a lot of people out there who act like they're really surprised, or that it's really unfair that the church teaches this. And they just say that they want their freedom, and they want everything to be the way that they want it. And if that means that at some point they want to get divorced, then that's okay. But seriously, divorce sucks. And it causes pain, and it is not from God. In 2004, so this was quite a long time ago, in 2004 the divorce rate was about 50% of all marriages in America. And this is a staggering number, and it's something that people use as an excuse to not get married a lot of times, or to live together before marriage, or to live together and never intend on getting married in the first place. And that people are starting to think that marriage is just this archaic institution and that it has no meaning or relevance in our world today. And our culture doesn't help at all. If you look at TV shows, there's this reality TV show called Married at First Sight, which is kind of interesting, but you shouldn't watch it because it's terrible. It's actually really terrible. But The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, super entertaining shows, but they really undermine the meaning of marriage and what this actually means. Celebrities nowadays are getting more publicity for their divorces than even for the movies that they're making or the music that they're making, and they're actually profiting and making money off of the publicity that they're getting from their divorces. And then we watch all these girls, we love to watch our chick flicks, and we get these lies from chick flicks that are this guy's gonna pursue you no matter what hell you put him through. He's just gonna say, oh, you're so pretty and so good and so I love you, and that's just how it's gonna end up. Or on the other end, we get these buddy movies where these guys are together and just treat women so terribly and just use them and throw them away, and they never have to look at the repercussions of that. And it just kind of plays into it in a different way. And so our culture doesn't really love stories, it loves entertainment. But real love stories aren't that entertaining. And it's not fun to watch the happily ever after. It's way more fun to watch everything that leads up to the happily ever after. The romance at the beginning of the relationship, the getting to know each other, the mistakes, the learning, the growth, and all that's very entertaining. But when we get it in our heads that our lives have to be very exciting, like what we see on TV or in the movies, or very entertaining, or good or easy all the time, and when that becomes our expectation, things get really disappointing. Life could be really disappointing if that's our expectation, because things happen. It's a much bigger deal than what our culture says it is. Marriage is more than just romance. It's more than just a contract or an agreement or a financially wise decision. It's more than just an end to our loneliness. I know that a lot of people feel in the video, he said this quote, I'd rather be unhappy than lonely. Loneliness is such a horrible feeling, and people think that if they are in a relationship that loneliness is going to be taken away, but it absolutely isn't. And that's part of the reason people get divorced, is because their spouse treats them, ignores them when they need attention, or not even attention, but when they need something, or they treat them badly, and it creates a feeling of loneliness in them, and they expect that this shouldn't be what marriage is about. And so they end up getting divorced because they are feeling lonely, even in the context of marriage. So marriage is so much more than that. Marriage is a vocation. It's a calling from God. It's a sacrament. And with a sacrament comes grace. And grace is something that's really special. We talked about grace last time that we met for Life Teen, and it's just kind of cool how they all, these things flow together. But grace makes all good things possible. Marriage is a good thing, but it's also a really difficult thing, and it's something that requires constant sacrifice. And when that's well done, when both people in the relationship are sacrificing for each other, it's a very beneficial thing. No one is being used, and both people are benefiting. And it can feel really good to make a sacrifice for somebody that you love and care about, especially when you know that they make sacrifices for you and love you back as well. But there are situations and circumstances that arise in marriages that make it really difficult for the couple to stay together. Things like if one spouse suddenly takes on drugs or alcohol, and it can be dangerous for the spouse or even the children involved to remain at home. And so in this case, the church recognizes that there are circumstances when it's no longer safe, and that a physical separation may be necessary. But there's a big difference between ending a marriage, like a civil marriage, so like legally ending a marriage, and ending a marriage in the context of the sacrament. Once a marriage takes place, it doesn't end until one of the people in the couple dies. And Jesus actually clarifies this teaching. In Mark, today we heard this in the Gospel, Mark 10, verses 5 through 12. It says, "The proud religious law keepers came to Jesus. They tried to trap him by saying, 'Does the law say that a man can divorce his wife for any reason?' He said to them, 'It was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote you this law.' Jesus replied, 'But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate. Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery.'" Jesus explains that it was for the safety of the people that Moses allowed divorce. Moses who allowed divorce, specifically. And something that used to happen was that out of desperation to remarry, men would actually kill their wives in order to remarry. And so Moses was seeing this happening, and he was like, you know what, like, life is precious, like, don't kill each other. He allowed divorce because of their hardness of heart, is what they call it. But Jesus actually says that he, quotes back all the way to Genesis and says, "In the beginning, it was not so." And that phrase, "in the beginning," is a super important phrase. Because in the beginning, this is not what marriage was intended to be, not something that even could have divorce. So Jesus corrects and perfects this law in this moment. And he reminds them, the Pharisees, or the religious law keepers, he reminds them of the sacredness of marriage and emphasizes the original meaning of marriage that God gave. So the question is there just no hope for people who are divorced? And let me give you guys the short answer first. The short answer is there is always hope. Always. Okay, please remember that in any circumstance in your life, there's always hope. But first of all, in the context of divorce and marriage, a divorced couple can go through something called an annulment. And I want to be very clear about this. An annulment is not just a Catholic version of divorce. Not every couple that applies for an annulment gets an annulment. An annulment is not easy, but its purpose is to basically look back at the couple's marriage and see if it even was a sacramental marriage to begin with. And there's a lot of reasons that a marriage might not have been a sacrament to begin with, and I'm going to go to an extreme example here, but an extreme example would be like, say one person was married but lied about it, like already currently married and lied about it, and then got married to you. Like, that would not be a real marriage because there would be very important information that was being withheld. And so if that was the case, you could go and get an annulment and look back and say, okay, this was not a real marriage to begin with. And so just because a marriage legally occurs doesn't mean that it's actually a sacrament in the church. And the process to determine whether an annulment is appropriate for the situation is really long. It's kind of expensive sometimes, and it's not very easy, but it can be really worthwhile if the couple really believes that their marriage was not a marriage to begin with. And because after they get the annulment and go to reconciliation, they're free to marry again. And I say again because they weren't really married the first time. They're free to marry again, but this time in the church. And so it gives them a little bit of freedom after that. But if a marriage was a marriage to begin with, there is always still hope. And God can make any situation blessed. And if a couple divorces civilly but remains married in the church, they're asked to live pure and holy lives as single people. And if they do this, they can still receive the Eucharist and all of the sacraments and participate in the church in the same way that they would be before. It might not sound that great at first when you just hear like, oh, you'd have to be, like live your life as a single person. But God is so amazing. And if you let him, he's going to make any situation something good. And I've known people who have been divorced and have lived separately as single people because they, for whatever circumstances, they got divorced. But they are happy and they live very full and blessed lives because they put their trust in God. Happily ever after can only exist if God is part of the equation. And no matter what your state in life is, whether you're a teenager, whether you're a single adult, whether you're a married adult, divorced, widowed, whatever, you can have happily ever after if you let God give that to you.